The bounce. Divorce drains a lot of energy, regardless of how long you've been married, whether you're the one divorcing or the one being divorced. I was reared Catholic and was introduced to the term divorce through a country song sung by Tammy Wynette. She began by spelling the word correctly and continued from there. Tammy's song's opening line, "Our divorce becomes final today," stated it all for me. Although mine hasn't arrived yet, it is on its way. Just so you know where I'm coming from, I wasn't the one who started it and only learned about it after I was served at work. After a brief call to my wife's cell phone, I was instructed to peruse the documentation. She cut me off before I could get an explanation for why she was doing this. I didn't want to read the dreadful paperwork. Okay, so maybe our marriage wasn't the perfect fairy tale, but I still didn't believe it was all that horrible. Sure, it occasionally required more work, but isn't that the case with all marriages? We had money problems all the time, especially after the birth of our son Danny. Only when Danny was old enough to be left with a babysitter did Becky transition from a carefree college lifestyle to that of a new mother working a few hours a day. As you can see, Becky was against having children until after we were married and had been working at our jobs for a few years. She now enjoyed attending concerts, parties, and most importantly, shopping for clothes. She believed she had it all, living at home, attending school, and being devoted to her boyfriend, and perhaps she did. She, or rather, we, had everything planned out. After graduating from college, we were expected to get married and spend our first few years of marriage doing trips across the world. We were only going to consider purchasing a home and starting a family, possibly with 2 children, at that point, but I kind of derailed those plans. Everything was going well on our date, at least in my opinion. That night, I wanted to sleep with her, but she didn't. I suppose I forced the matter and convinced her to do it. We began making love under the stars when I took a blanket from my car's trunk. Yes, we were actually making love. I loved her, oh God. That night, I made the grave error of leaving my protection in the car's glove box. I should have raced back and retrieved one, I knew, but I made the last-minute decision to pull out rather than stop and head back to the car. I must not have moved quickly enough. After a span of 2 months, an irate Becky was berating me for not exercising greater caution. I had been the one to provide birth control since she was unable to take tablets because they caused physical illness. Jesus Christ, now what the hell are we going to do? My parents are going to crap, and even though my dad likes you, he's going to be royally pissed at you for getting his daughter pregnant, she cried. Han, we'll just get married a little sooner than we'd planned, that's all. She cried back at me, that's all. And what about the baby? Despite the fact that we were both thinking about the word, neither of us wanted to speak it aloud because we are Catholic. We're going to take a little break after this semester, and I'm going to get a job so that we can start getting settled before the baby comes. After the baby comes, we'll go back and finish school, so we'll be right back where we are now. Can you say crap for brains? Because that's exactly what we both thought in private when I made that grandiose speech, knowing full well that it was never going to happen the way I'd laid it out. But if we kept it to ourselves, there was a chance my little fantasy would come true, which it did, and in a way that neither of us could have predicted. First, having only completed 2 years of college, I was unable to secure the fantastic job I had always dreamed of. The pay was decent, but I had to work long hours because I was working a lot of overtime. Second, my benefits were only partially covering Becky's pregnancy because of something called a pre-existing medical condition. And third, Becky had a difficult pregnancy that left her bedridden for the final 2 months. Despite all of this, we were barely making ends meet financially, not counting the medical bills that were driving us further into debt each month. Becky's long locks were replaced with a short-cropped hairstyle that she claimed was easier to maintain, and I quickly learned not to mention her weight. Several times, I caught her staring into her full-length body mirror, looking sad as she rubbed her belly. She was not a happy camper. Becky used to be a shapely 5'6" slender beauty with shoulder-length light brown hair. Like she said, both our fathers placed the blame squarely on me. Mine asked why I couldn't have just put it in my pants or covered it up. To him, everything was black and white, and accidents only happened when you did something foolish, like this. Fortunately, our mothers adopted a slightly different stance. While they were still unhappy, they were far more understanding because there was going to be a baby involved, their first grandchild. We didn't have the big splashy wedding that Becky had always imagined, but we had a small wedding with just family and close friends. And since money was still tight and she made it very clear that she wasn't going to go parading around some damn resort looking like a whale in some frumpy outfit, we didn't have a honeymoon. Instead, we stayed home and tried to make the best of it. We discovered a charming little 2-story house that had been listed for more than 2 years. At the moment, it was nothing special, but it had potential. The owner wanted to sell it during this recession, so we worked out a rent with option arrangement with him. He wasn't thrilled about it because he wanted to get his money back, but our mothers persuaded him in some way. After all, who was going to argue with 2 determined women? The women would dream about paint and curtains for the windows, and I would think about all the hard work that would be required to make it a real home for the 3 of us, and that it would soon be just the 3 of us. Becky liked the house, and for the first time in a long time, she was beginning to smile again. After 16 hours of intense labor, and after one of the hottest summers on record, Becky gave birth to our son, Danny, weighing 9 pounds, 10 ounces. I was there for her the entire time, even though it wasn't an easy birth. She looked like a limp dish rag, exhausted and drained, and her smile was more likely due to the fact that the labor was finally over than to the joyous bundle she was holding. Though the hard effort of adding another mouth only served to drive us farther apart, everyone was delighted for us and declared we were now a family, whatever that meant. "Han, how about we give you a break and put him on formula? I could take up the night feeding since you haven't gotten a decent night's sleep since we left the hospital. Mother's milk has special things in it and it's better for our son, don't you know anything?" She yelled at me. In all honesty, I didn't, but I was quickly and painfully learning this lesson the hard way. Life became even more difficult when he developed colic. From eating to crying to pooping to wanting to eat again, he no longer skipped the sleeping phase. When Becky finally gave in, we gave him baby formula, but that didn't completely cure all of our issues either. Our parents gave us the nicest gift ever, 2 weekends by ourselves, after 4 incredibly difficult months. Danny was being held by her parents until late Sunday afternoon after they picked him up on Friday afternoon. We'd hardly been together physically, so I figured we'd spend the weekend catching up in bed. I was just partially correct. Becky's favorite food is Chinese, so Friday night I brought it home and found her sound sleeping. I imagined we'd have dinner and indulge in a little amorous behavior after I let her sleep until she woke up. It was almost 11 when I got into bed next to my wife, having eaten dinner alone. The following morning, at 7:30, I got up, made some coffee, and waited. The following morning at 10:32, she came downstairs donning her rabbit slippers and the worn-out blue terry cloth robe she had owned for ages. "I think I went to heaven and died last night," she remarked, grinning and extending her arms. After Mom picked up Danny, I went to bed a little after 2 and fell asleep. I was awakened to the time of 9:30 this morning. "You should have woken me up." I sipped on my second cup of coffee and remarked, "Babes, you needed a good night's sleep more than Chinese last night. I've got coffee and plan on making you the breakfast of your dreams." That morning, dreams were made of sausage links and French toast with whipped cream and fresh fruit. After cooking till she was unable to eat anything more, I cleaned the kitchen and she took a shower. Okay, I was excited. I was going to make love to my wife, or rather, get laid. Even though I knew I wouldn't last the entire time the first time because it had been a while, I still thought I could get through at least 2 sessions before lunch. I made sure my chin was as smooth as a baby's bottom by shaving in the shower to save time. I quickly dried off after getting out of the shower and went in search of my future wife while grinning broadly. My hormones were screaming at me, maybe because she was waiting for me in bed with a fancy outfit on. Hastily, I returned to our bedroom. Hell, she had on a whole outfit. "Hurry up and get dressed. I've got a big shopping list for today. We'll start off at Walmart and then I want to stop off at Lowe's and look at shutters for our bedroom. I don't like shades and the sun is waking me up too early every morning. I thought we'd fool around a bit this morning. You know, reconnect. Steve, we've got the whole evening for that. Right now we've got things to do. We can fool around later, if there's time." "If there's time," my tiny mind exclaimed. I changed into my clothes. We purchased paint for Danny's room and 2 wooden shutter sets for our bedroom from Lowe's. We acquired new bed linens and an extra set of bath towels at Walmart because they were on sale. But Becky took a very long time to leave the store because she had to go through the whole thing to check out what else was discounted. We returned home after 2.5 hours. Then she insisted on getting Danny's walls painted and the shutters installed before she had time for the 2 of us. It took me about 2 hours to install the shutters, and during that time Becky moved the furniture around in Danny's room so that I could paint the walls. I started with the walls and worked my way down to the trim. I was on a mission, but she mentioned something about breaking for supper, so I worked till almost 10 o'clock while she finished the leftover Chinese food. After finishing, I sat on the floor with my back against the crib and said to myself, "God, I hate trim work." I still had the muddy paintbrush in my hand. I about passed out when Becky mentioned that she believed a second coat would improve the look of the walls. "You don't like the color?" She frowned and remarked, "It looked different on the paint swatch, that's all." That night, I finished the second coat. When I walked in just after midnight, she was in bed watching TV. I smelled like paint and body stink, and I was dirty and tired. "Take a look at the room and tell me what you think while I take a shower." I got whipped. I was too exhausted to eat after operating continuously for over 10 hours, even though I felt a little peckish. I fell asleep after taking a shower, and then I dried myself and went to bed. Before I realized it, I had fallen asleep. She failed to wake me awake, just like I did on Friday night. On Sunday morning, I discovered her rearranging the furnishings in Danny's room. After I assisted her, we went downstairs to have breakfast together. I made bacon and Belgian waffles since I was starving. I think I finished 3 of them in a row before giving up. As she sipped her coffee, Becky inquired about my plans for the remainder of the day. I followed her upstairs with a sparkle in my eye, and we slept for the next 2 hours. We both needed the release, which came too quickly the first time because it had been a long. I made sure she got off at least twice on the second, leisurely ride. Although this was a nice diversion, Danny returned by 4:30 and things returned to their usual. After my parents picked up Danny 2 weeks later, we spent a Saturday night out together with our old pals. We were the only married couple with children. I knew they were grateful it was us and not them, even though they all claimed to be envious of us. That weekend, we didn't make love, but we did fall asleep 3 or 4 times together. I was told after 6 months at my new position that the employer would pay back whatever education I took for work-related courses. I was pursuing a degree in business and marketing, so anything I needed to take to get my degree was okay. Becky wasn't in 7th heaven, but I was. It isn't fair. You get to go back to school, and I get stuck at home watching Danny. Honey, as soon as we get a little more ahead, you can go back to school and finish your degree. It's just that they're going to pay for everything outside of books. I'd be a fool not to take advantage of it. She comprehended, but, as I mentioned, she wasn't pleased. The following 2 years passed in a sort of blur. 2 nights a week, I attended school, and the other night, I completed an online course. Therefore, I was either working or studying when I wasn't at school. I made sure to reserve Saturday and Sunday for our family, which included me preparing all of the meals and engaging in a fun activity. I was glad for Becky when she started working a few hours each night. She was able to leave the house and now had some extra money. Finally, things were going our way. Upon discovering that I could complete my remaining 4 classes for my degree entirely online, I fulfilled a long-standing commitment I had made to my spouse. I assured her she could return to complete her degree at the collegiate level. You mean it? You're not joking around, are you? Did I get anything that night? Honey, it's your turn now. Indeed, it was a far nicer experience than the quickie diet I'd been on for the past year. There had never been any time, but now that there would be, we'd been so busy that we'd begun to fall apart. I arranged for her parents and mine to watch Danny while I was at work, with me taking over the babysitting responsibilities at night. After so many years of supporting me, Becky earned it. By the time we were 27, we would both still have our degrees, even though we were almost 24 now. Not bad, we'd have it all, a child, a home, and 4-year degrees. Becky was having difficulty in school and wasn't receiving the same good marks as before everything got crazy. To improve her marks, she had to put in a lot more effort and even joined a study group. She argued that she could do it on her own even though I offered to help. Her first year was, I believe, the most difficult of our marriage. I started to feel more like I had a roommate than a wife by the end of her 2nd semester. Again, there was no time for us to get together because she had 3 nights a week with her study group and 3 days a week of school. Perhaps this was my school experience back then, but I don't recall it being exactly as horrible. I almost gasped when I asked, "You want to go where?" "I want to go to Panama City for spring break with my study group." "Becky, I barely see you, and now you want to go off with the people you've been spending every waking minute with instead of your husband. What's wrong with this picture?" I inquired. The annoyance I felt came out in my voice. "Steve, it'll be Thursday night and I'll be back late Sunday night. It's not like I'll be gone the whole 2 weeks. I'm not driving and I still have a little mad money left. Come on, I think I deserve this." While not happy, I told her it was acceptable. I even gave her a few extra dollars. I advised her to take it easy and to give me a ring when she arrived. She was no longer an adolescent, I told her. After that remark, she shot me a terrible look. After bidding her farewell with a kiss on Thursday night, I didn't hear from her again until late Sunday afternoon. To say I was furious would be an understatement. She never returned the messages I had left for her on the hotel's phone, which I had called at least a dozen times. I had none of her friends' cell phone numbers because I didn't know any of them. On Thursday night, she had switched off her phone, and it wasn't turned on again until Sunday morning. When she did call, she tried to justify herself, saying, "I know you're mad and you have every right to be, but would you believe I lost my phone and only found it Sunday morning?" I yelled, "No," into the phone. "Would you believe I was drunk for 3 days? I was sultry. That I would believe." Without even wishing to hear an answer, I questioned, "What else did you do that you weren't supposed to?" "I didn't do anything and I don't like the tone of your voice," she responded. "Just what are you implying?" "Oh, I don't know. Just what do drunken women do on spring break, anyway?" "Will I see your picture on a Girls Gone Wild video or worse? I don't like where this conversation is heading. We'll talk about this when I get home." I hung up, saying, "We sure as hell will." It became extremely ugly on Sunday night. I made a vague hint about her perhaps cheating on me, but I didn't ask outright. She angrily disputed it and questioned how I could have accused her of anything like that. Our marriage took a tumble after that night. I don't know, maybe because you're the one who said she was too drunk to call her husband to tell him she was all right, because maybe she wasn't all right. Her apology for not calling and for being such a scatterbrain was delivered with no emotion in her voice. I was then held accountable for everything. Had I not gotten her pregnant, we would have been living a carefree life, touring the world and enjoying nice careers. She told me about all the groups that were taking summer vacations that we would never be able to take, vacations to the Caribbean, Mexico, or Europe. "Becky, we're not dead yet, are we? So, we're not quite as free as your single friends, but would you give up Danny to be that way?" She hadn't spoken it out loud, but I knew she had thought it more than once. Steve, what a horrible thing to say. I love Danny to death. I never once said I was sorry he was born. Thus, our married life continued. Although things did slightly improve, they were still very different from before the trip to Panama City. Although we had slept together most of the time, we had made love. I told her that I missed our lengthy flirtations and passionate moments together, but she advised me to make the most of our current situation because a child was living in the house. Becky told me her study group was meeting on Saturday night when I arranged a free weekend for us. She coaxed me into attending their get-together even though I had advised her to do what she wanted to do, which turned out to be a terrible mistake. The oldest member of the group was, I believe, 22, and rather an immature one at that. Their only thought was to party and have fun. They were young, single, and focused on this. I thought back to my first 2 years of college and how much I'd drunk, but after 4 years, I realized that getting wasted and getting laid wasn't my top priorities. Even though there were a lot of smoking, attractive single ladies there, I was more than happy with what I had, so I attempted to blend in even though I wasn't into drinking games anymore. With most of the dumb games, there was a lot of kissing, flirting, and hand-playing. I suppose that drinking too much causes your inhibitions and common sense to vanish. Before the night was done, the majority of these people would be worshipping the porcelain god, and the others would never remember half of what they did that night. I grabbed Becky at around 1 in the morning when one of her friends became overly friendly. He was trying to cop a feel and making out with my wife when I found him. I don't think he could have even stood up, so I didn't kick the shit out of him. Becky, she was also blasted, but at least she was sensible enough to keep silent. I was not at all impressed by any of the people in her study group overall. Were we inseparable on Saturday night? Even if she hadn't passed out on the way home, there would be no way in hell. On Sunday, I was conducting a slow burn while she was suffering from a severe hangover. I know you're pissed, but I don't want to hear about it right now. Chris was drunk and didn't know what he was doing and who he was doing it with. But you did, didn't you? What would you have done if you found me kissing some strange women? Or maybe you just don't care any longer, is that it? That got her back on her feet. Steve, what an awful thing to say. Do you think I set out to get felt up last night? It was a stupid mistake on both our parts, that's all. It's not something that either one of us would have done sober. And how much of this crap happened in Panama City where I wasn't there to stop it? How many times do I have to tell you? Nothing happened up there. I didn't do a damn thing with anyone. Why won't you believe me? Becky was growing agitated once more. Well, if this can happen with me in the same room, what happened with me 6 hours away? If I hear your accusations one more time, it'll be a cold day in hell before you get any nookie from me again. I shot back at her. It's already been a cold day in hell. Becky, you just don't see what's happening to us, do you? You're a married woman and a mother acting like a single girl again. You're constantly picking your new young friends over your family, and I'm more than a little concerned. She started to remark, well, if I hadn't gotten knocked up, but I stopped her in her tracks. For the millionth time, I'm sorry, but unless you can push Danny back into your womb, you're going to have to live with it. Danny's not going away, but unless you get your head out of your back, we're not going to make it. I had laid down the law. Her ears were emitting steam, which I could see. She pivoted, stormed back into our bedroom, and shut the door with a thud, locking it. I was in love with her, but every day it got tougher because of her. She didn't notice it, as I already stated. Things were chilly, at best, when we had dinner together. She was now practically always gone at night with her friends. We got into a heated argument on Friday night when she returned home intoxicated or high. At last, I presented her with an option, our marriage or her friends. You can't tell me what to do. I'm not some 8-year-old you can order about. Then stop acting like one. Steve, you've called all the shots since we've been married, but not this time. They're my friends and I'll see them if and when I want. I left and didn't return for 2 days, which I suppose was immature of me, but I was terrified of what I could have said or done. Then I guess I know where your priorities really lie. I was served at work on Thursday the following week. She wouldn't speak with me on the phone or in person when I tried to talk to her. Everything was in the papers, so I was told to read it. The documents outlined everything in terms of irreconcilable differences. She wanted the house with me paying the mortgage, complete medical and dental benefits, alimony for herself because she was unemployed, and child support for Danny. She must have been smoking something quite strong, though I'm not sure what she had been smoking. They were essentially demanding more than I had earned. My dad's lawyer friend Doug took pity on me and handled all of my divorce process pro bono. He advised me to contest any alimony and to request shared physical custody of Danny so that there would be the least amount of child support. Becky was more than willing to work, but I ordered her to quit right now because my money was funding her college. Steve, you don't want it to get ugly if for no other reason that you have a son and will have to have at least some contact with her. But she never spoke to me until it was too late for the two of us. Doug, I don't even want the damn divorce. If I could just talk to her, I know I could convince her to drop it. Life, as they say, continued. For the time being, she and Danny moved home with her parents. It seems that there was no chance of getting her to talk to me again. Though they were on her side, just as mine were on mine, her parents expressed regret. When I told my supervisor that I could be leaving since I was getting divorced, he told me he'd been through 2 divorces and had some advice. At that point, he informed me that he would be eliminating my overtime and slashing my income. We're not doing that badly, are we? Look, Steve, I like you, and I understand what you're going through. You need to suck it up for the next 6 to 8 months because they're going to base your child support and everything else on what you are presently making. You're going to be losing well over a third of what you're making, but it will be only temporary. If you need any extra money, I know a guy who owns a gym in Ashland who will pay you cash money to clean his place every night. Your wife is going to realize pretty quickly that it's not going to go exactly like everyone is telling her. On that one, he was correct. I went back in with my parents after leaving my house. I ceased paying the monthly mortgage and canceled my phone, cable, and electricity. What she was seeking was beyond what I could possibly afford. My employer sent a letter to my lawyer informing me that my overtime would be terminated immediately owing to the economic slump and that employees might also have to accept a 5% salary drop. She shrieked at me over the phone, "Steve, how come you're not paying the house payment and the other bills? We're going to lose the house. So, and your point, where are Danny and I going to live? I guess with your parents, sure as hell not mine. But I was told you'd have to pay the house payments until Danny turned 18 so we could live there. I'd sooner lose the house and my job than to pay so you could live there scot-free. How stupid do you think I really am?" But they told me, "I don't care who told you what, I'll give you child support for Danny, but that's all. Last time I looked I didn't have sucker tattooed on my forehead, at least not anymore. Maybe we can talk about this, work out some agreement. I'd hate like hell to lose the house after all the work we did on it. The house means crap to me. I did kind of hope that we could work through our problems, but I guess you have your own agenda going forward. Too bad, we used to have something special." For nearly 2 months more, the attorneys exchanged views back and forth. He wasn't the brightest tool in the shed, Becky's lawyer. Though he was inexpensive, I suppose you get what you pay for, she was only his second case. I'd thrown him more than one curve by asking for joint physical custody and cutting my pay by 40%. Doug, my lawyer, indicated that if Becky had sole custody, I would give her 20% of my income, but if we had shared custody, I would only give her 15%. Becky was to take on half of the current debt, and there would be no house payments or alimony. Our medical costs exceeded $10,000, but we only had one credit card with a balance of less than $1,000. I had been making a monthly payment on it, but once I was served, I stopped making any more. Every day it was growing less and less rosy for her. I turned down Becky's lawyer's initial request for a face-to-face meeting. The house wasn't looking so good, and the bank was considering foreclosure because no one had been cutting the lawn in the previous 8 weeks. Every night, I would spend roughly 2 hours driving 20 miles to my other employment after finishing my day job. It accomplished one thing for me, though: it kept me occupied and grounded. Even though I was seeing Danny on the weekends at my mom's place, I was still able to finish my coursework. That I had time to consider Becky? Hell, absolutely, but when I did, I only felt enraged once again, so I made every effort to keep her from entering my thoughts. The compromise that Becky came up with even startled the living daylights out of me. She suggested that until we could sell the house or have one of us buy the other out, we should both reside in it. The main floor would be neutral ground, she and Danny would have the upstairs, and I would have the bedroom and the basement. In this manner, the equity we had accrued in the house would not be lost. Not only could we divide the bills equally, but we could also divide Danny's custody without having to move him around every week. She asked that I take care of the utilities and that I pay the house payment. As I would be covering the majority of the costs, my portion of the house would be prorated. The food and all other home expenses would be divided between us. I suppose that was her desperate attempt to keep the house intact. I made the decision to get together. "Well, what do you think of my offer?" "I don't think it's going to work," I answered. "You did nothing but complain at me the last 6 months we were together. What would be the difference now?" "Well, I'd be upstairs and you'd be in the basement. Our contact would be limited, and we're only doing this to save what little nest egg we have. I think when the market opens up we'll make at least $30,000 in profit on our place. I'd hate to lose that after all our work." "You mean after all my work, don't you? I lived there too, didn't I?" I shot back, sarcastically, "when you decided to grace us with your presence." She shot out at me, "Hey, I was going to school and studying." It was becoming ugly again. "Yeah, right, tell me another lie, why don't you? I don't care what you believe, I wasn't cheating on you." "Becky, this isn't going to work. The first time your friends come over and get in my face I'm going to kick their butts out and it'll be a done deal. And I'm sure as hell not going to be your live-in babysitter while you go off gallivanting around every night. Why don't we just say we had a good run while it lasted and let it go at that? Don't you even want to try? Why, you were the one that wanted this divorce because I was the one who was holding you back after ruining your life, so excuse me if I don't have a lot of sympathy for you." "I never said that." "Oh, I'm sorry. You mean that you spending 6 days a week with your friends was more important than spending time with your family?" "I was studying, for Christ's sakes. How many times do I have to tell you that?" It wasn't going the way Becky had anticipated. "You don't have to explain anything to me anymore. You're getting exactly what you wanted, and I hope you choke on it. How about if we set up rules for each of us? You know, who does what and when. That way there won't be any misunderstandings." She began to plead. God darn it, I despised and loved this woman at the same time. Perhaps if we took this action, she would realize how much it would cost her and end the dreadful divorce. Though it seemed unlikely, it was my final opportunity. All right, you give me a list of your conditions and I'll make up a list of my own. We will see if we can come to some type of agreement, I said to her. I said nothing, but instead said, great, give me a couple of days and then we can get together again. You'll see, we're two adults and I know we can make it work. We traded lists 2 days later, and that's when the fur flew. I lost around 1/3 of mine, and she lost about half of hers. I would take care of the housework, and she would cook and shop. Each of us would have a free night on either Friday or Saturday, and we would divide up the child care responsibilities. I made it clear that there wouldn't be any gatherings or overnight visitors. Once the final conditions were agreed upon, we signed, had the agreement notarized, and included it with the divorce documents. It was difficult to get back on top of the bills, but we divided the expenses. Among other things, Becky had to take out a loan for that. With her 3 classes, she was working 3 or 4 nights a week and had very little free time. It hurt too much to sit at the table and act like Danny's loving family when I was eating all my meals in the basement. Eventually, one evening, she took the dinner she had prepared for Danny and herself to my room and declared that they would be dining downstairs with me every night if I wasn't going upstairs to eat with them. I gave in. Things were nearly back to normal after a month or so. We shared a good chuckle and got along well. It had been a year since we had gotten along so well. I was always happy to help her with Danny, and when she asked for a little assistance with her schooling, I was more than happy to oblige. Like I mentioned, perhaps this was the necessary wake-up call for us both. I assisted her upstairs, undressed her, and got her ready for bed when she arrived home late one Friday night, plastered. She couldn't keep her eyes off of me in the morning. Thanks for your help last night. I guess I had a little too much to drink and ended up having someone drive me home. No issue, I answered. It felt good to see her body once more. I wished I had given in to a few sensations as I hurried off to my restroom after putting her to bed. I wanted her, damn it. The divorce was less than a month away and the paperwork was proceeding through the courts. Without actually saying anything, I was doing my best to convince her that we should give it another go when 2 things occurred. It took roughly 2 weeks for our divorce to be finalized. I was tidying up the gym that night when she entered. She was little over 5 feet 2, maybe 22 years old, and had an athletic build, firm and strong. She must have been exercising in one of the back rooms because I didn't realize anyone had left for the day. As she made her way to the women's showers, we exchanged glances. She came out wearing jeans and a short t-shirt as I was about to finish up. Steve, isn't it? Yes, precisely Steve Moore, I replied, grinning at her. Hi, I'm Amber Collins. I teach the afternoon aerobics classes. Kenny lets me work out at night when most people are gone. This way I don't have to share the machines and have other people bothering me. That is, unless I want to be bothered, she stated with a grin. Well, now that you're done, I can finish up with the women's locker room and get the hell out of here. It's late and I'm hungry and tired all at the same time. How about if I help you and we grab a quick bite, she responded. Although I wasn't sure how to accept her offer, I wasn't going to turn down a favor. I grinned, and in 20 minutes we were finished and gone. She said I should follow her since she knew of a great spot nearby. We had placed our order and were inside after 5 minutes. She had olive-colored complexion, deep, rich black hair that was still moist from her shower, and the greenest eyes I had ever seen. She laughed and said, Steve, if you stare any harder, you're going to burn 2 holes through me. I apologize, I murmured, feeling a little ashamed. It's just that you are really beautiful, do you know that? If that's a pickup line, you're going to have to do a lot better than that. I must have looked like a red-faced high school student as I blushed. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't offend you, and I'm not trying to pick you up really, I mumbled. The comment, why the hell not? I'm not good enough for you, sparked an hour-long conversation about my private life. You see, I'm still trying to save my marriage, I stated to her. Wow, talk about going down to the wire. What are you going to do next week when it becomes final? Still try until I can see no more hope of reconciliation. We spoke for almost an hour more. You're a better person than me. I would have dumped the woman and moved on. Life is too short to spend it on someone that's stupid. Amber, I've got to call it a night. I've got schoolwork I need to finish by tomorrow night, and a list of honeydews that won't quit. I really had a nice time tonight. Maybe we'll see each other around again. As I was driving home, I wondered what she had intended to say when she said, Steve, I work at the gym. Of course I'll see you around. I do wish you the best of luck, but if it doesn't work out, keep me in mind. I can always use a workout partner. When I initially arrived at my driveway, I realized something was off. Becky's car was still in the garage, and there was an unfamiliar automobile parked in my position. My watch indicated that it was a little after 10:30, so it was most likely simply one of her buddies dropping by. After parking where Becky had designated, I entered the home. I carried on with my work since the kitchen was tidy and I couldn't see or hear anyone. About 1.5 hours after I went upstairs to grab a beer, I heard a familiar sound coming from the next floor. Believing I had misheard, I stealthily ascended the stairs and found myself outside the chamber that had served as our bedroom. I could hear Becky's climaxing from across the kitchen when we were making love. She wasn't silent at all. I didn't stay to hear what he had to say, but I could hear his voice from inside. I returned to my new bedroom after grabbing my beer from the kitchen. I cried even though men aren't allowed to cry. That night, I broke both emotionally and physically. I became aware that my marriage was truly finished for the first time since I had been served. Oh no, she hadn't even bothered to wait till our divorce was finalized the following week. The discomfort subsided after 2 more beers, but the emptiness was beginning to set in. For the first time in my life, I felt disoriented and alone. On Sunday morning, I left before anyone else got up. Later that afternoon, she called, but I ignored her voicemail since I wasn't feeling well and I didn't want to see her. She was talking to me about our customary Sunday night supper, but I hadn't felt like eating. My comment: "It happens. When you lose your love, you won't like to eat. But it will be alright, you will see other women really soon." Part 2 ending is coming later in the day. Prepare for the spin in the ending. See you there.